Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We are Baltimore positive, positively getting the Maryland Crab Cake Tour back out on the road. It's going to be a cup of soup or bowl. We begin in less than 3 weeks. It's all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. I'll have candy cane cashes to give away. Might have some fresh Harlem Globetrotters as well. I know you've been hearing those ads around here. I may even break out my Curly Neal sit down with him from many years ago as well. It is winter time. It is that little period where nothing's supposed to be going on, but everything's going on. Obviously, the Orioles still chasing pitching, and the Baltimore Ravens chasing a head coach for the first time in 18 years. Luke Jones will be at the press conference on Tuesday. If you hear this on the other end of the press conference, we'll have plenty to say about it. If you're out on the WNST text service, you'll get any breaking news first of the head coaching search, unless you're on AT&T and it might be delayed because that's just the way it is. I have no idea. Luke is here. He's Baltimore Luke. I guess we spent two different stretches during our time saying, well, you want to fire Harbaugh, who are you going to hire? Now the Steelers are going to deal with that, right? You can fire Tomlin, who are you going to hire? I see all these guys. We're going to hire Stefanski, Schwartz, one of these guys that didn't work somewhere. I don't know. Like, they are extending their search, though, and you made the best prediction ever last week, and I had sort of forgotten about this in the because they don't search for coaches around here. What a brain drain it is to bring in every coach you've ever had a crush on and get to talk to them about football for an hour or two or three for as long as you want. I don't know how long these interviews have been. All I know is that the NFL and the Ravens have a system now. It's like all these pregame interviews on the field that are usually pretty terrible. Although D'Amico Ryans is pretty good the other night because he wants to be great. Most of these guys don't want to be great. They don't want to do it. But there's these league things that are have become like what every team does. Those interviewed, those little Instagram little pictures with the Falcons logo and Harbaugh's face on it, they're all over the league, right? Like, everybody's interviewing everybody.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that going on right now. And as we talked about late last week, you want to talk to other people. And it's not just about hiring a head coach. It's not just about potentially finding a new OC or a new defensive coordinator. It's also finding out information, finding out what others think of your operation, what others think of Lamar Jackson, what others think of your offense, what others think of your defense. I mean, let's face it, regardless of who they're going to hire to be their defensive coordinator or anything like that, how could you not watch what the Houston Texans defense did against Pittsburgh compared to the Ravens giving up 23 points to the Steelers in the second half a week ago?
Well, I must say that it's the 25th anniversary tomorrow of Goose laying on Rich Gannon.
Yeah.
And we're 25 years and 2 weeks out on the greatest defense. So I wrote a book about defense around here, and it holds up a quarter of a century later as of next week. So it's pretty good.
It does. Although in today's NFL, Goose probably would have been arrested and taken off the field for doing that to a quarterback today. But no, I mean, you saw what championship caliber defense looked like on Monday night. And I'm not saying that means that the Houston Texans are going to win the Super Bowl, but you saw quite a contrast with that compared to what we saw from the Ravens defense in 2025. And that's even, with or without Kyle Hamilton, that was not a group that was championship caliber in that way. So, it's just a little reminder there. And it's not to say that that's the only way you win, but to bring it back to the coaching search, it's, how do you get back to more of that, right? How do you get back to winning in the regular season to the degree that they've been accustomed to, which they had done until this season? Also, then, how do you break through, right? So you talk to people and you want to find out. You want to learn about your football team. You want to learn about tendencies of other teams, just in how they view the game. Not necessarily that you're going to get these amazing secrets or anything like that. So there's plenty of that going around. I mean, as of, through Monday's business, they've officially interviewed 7 candidates. And on Monday, it was Cliff Kingsbury and Anthony Weaver, two names that had already been thrown out there last week in terms of plans to talk to.
You think these are 3-hour interviews, 2-hour, 3-hour? How long do you think these are?
I mean, most of them are being completed via Zoom. So there's that. I mean, I would think if it's someone that you've thought enough of to identify, to talk to, and the general idea. It feels they're planning to talk to 15, 16 candidates, something like that in the first round, and then they'll narrow it down, and then that's when you'll start to get into the in-person interviews, the more extensive courtship, if you will.
By the way, and you'll ask Bisciotti this, or someone will. Somebody should ask him a hell of a lot of things, but um, will they be forthcoming about who their candidates are? Or do they have to be now by league I don't know. When Stephen Ross was flying Harbaugh's brother around on a plane and flying, like hiding things and all that, it feels like they're acting so transparent, like Harbaugh,
Yeah.
as to be like they're being honest. And I mean, I guess they're being I don't know whether they think this should be a transparent process or not, because as I've written, they think the whole place should be like, chaos was back in Get Smart, like total cones of silence, secrecy, all of that. I don't know. I mean, the job search itself, I'm wondering if that's considered to be secret in some way?
Yeah, I mean, and obviously it's different than it was 18 years ago. I mean, 18 years ago, social media was in its infancy. I mean, the NFL and the Ravens weren't even on Twitter in
But
2008.
reporters did an even better job, because I would have
Sure. Well,
five
but
coaches on the phone with me telling me really what was going on, as opposed to whatever this is. I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
well,
So
and
much about the NFL feels dishonest in a general sense, including head trauma and just, in a general sense, that the hiring process, something we haven't done here in 2 decades, and I know how Steve is. I'm just, I don't know. Do you think you're going to be tricked in some way? Or are they going to say these are our four, these are our five? Are they not going to narrow it down because Steve got his fifis hurt 20 years ago when Jason Garrett told him no? Literally, Steve didn't like that. Steve thought that was embarrassing. Didn't get the guy I wanted to get, and it's all over the paper. I mean, that's embarrassing for Steve. He thinks like an old guy in that way.
well, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to like that. I mean, and they're all billionaires, right? I mean, all these owners, whether they're older or younger, whether they've done this a lot or they haven't hired coaches very frequently, right? So there's ego involved,
Well,
right? I
there's
mean, it's the
power
NFL.
involved and control and
Sure.
power of everything, including the information itself.
Sure. So yeah, I mean that's a fair question. I mean they've put out there when they've completed interviews, that's kind of become standard protocol around the league. Obviously there's some rules in place and protocols in place in terms of which coaches you can talk to, when can you talk to them based on if their team's still in it. So there's some of that, but in terms of like you must formally announce who your finalists are like that, like I don't know. I'm not aware that they have to be 100% transparent on that. So, I mean, your question's a good one, and I'm not
Well, I'm
entirely
wondering
sure.
when this is done, when they're done with the 12, 14, when
First
they
round,
get
yeah,
drink short, force round, whatever that is,
yeah,
are they then, and I don't expect them to say there's three candidates or five or six, or
yeah,
whatever. Just, who are the candidates? Who are the five guys, or who are the six guys, or are there four guys, or are there six guys? And if they say they're three guys, they're probably lying to you anyway. I mean, Eric got to the point where he lied to me about a lot of stuff the last 15 years, where 25 years ago he wouldn't lie about anything. This is
yeah,
why I trust him. So like, I don't even know when the reporters report. Look, last week we had Rappaport saying X and we had Schefter saying Y, right? Because one of them's getting one side of the story. Like, there's only one side of this story if Bisciotti wants to do it right. There never needed to be lies coming out of his building from Chad Steele or from John Harbaugh or from Eric DeCosta or from him himself. They don't need to lie. They don't. They can be honest. They can be community partners. They can be all the things they say they are, and they can be honest about it or not. I'm just wondering, by Friday, I'm thinking their final list will be four, five, six, seven guys, something like that. A couple black guys, a couple white guys, a couple offense, a couple defense. They filled all the boxes of the Rooney Rule and all the things that they need to do now. I guess we'll hear from the coach and we'll have more to say about that. I don't think he'll be very forthcoming and saying we're getting an offensive mind. That just eliminates that, made Schwartz not hireable,
yeah.
right? So why are you bringing these guys in? So I don't think there'll be any of that. But I do think the more I hear and talk about it, the quarterback whisperer part of this was my first instinct, and that's sort of where when I hear other names out there, I'm like, Kingsbury seems more legitimate to me. Given what he does for a living and what he's done for a living. But I don't know. Steve may be thinking more like defense after watching the Texans with you Sunday night, Monday night.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to what we talked about from the beginning when we first started talking about, okay, John's gone, what's next? I mean, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself, and there's arguments to be made for any of those, right? I mean, you just laid it out in terms of watching what the Houston Texans did on Monday night and thinking, wow, the Ravens defense, save for maybe a couple games here or there, didn't look like that in 2025. I mean, there's no way you could say it looked like that. So do you go out and maybe look at someone like Robert Saleh in San Francisco and see what he's done with an injury ravaged defense and say, okay, it didn't go well for him in New York, but it was the Jets. It doesn't go well for anyone coaching the Jets. So how much are you going to hold that against him?
I
So
got a question for Bisciotti for you, but while we're at it, because I just thought about this.
okay.
So Harbaugh, when he was with me, many times said, I pick my coaches. Bird up, had that prickly, that thing that John gets going in here, the veins pop out.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of breakfast with John Harbaugh over the years. I did. And I mean, you know about that. And he would always say, I pick my coaches. It's in my contract, he would say. It's in my contract. I pick my coaches.
Mm-hmm.
So last week, the rub on the early reporting was he wanted changes and John said no. We've since learned there's different reporting. I don't know where the truth is. I'll just say different reporting on it because it's not that I don't trust Adam Schefter or Ian Rappaport. I don't trust John Harbaugh. The more I learn about him and his exit, the even less I trust him. But that being said, Steve, the next head coach, are you giving that coach full autonomy to pick their staff? Because the rumors have been that you've been interested in who the quarterback's coach or who the OC might be. So that's another way to do this. The way you get a young coach and you say, I'm picking your OC. Cliff Kingsbury's going to be Lamar's guy, but I don't like him as head coach. I like him in the room with Lamar. So let's make him the offensive guy. Let's hire Jim Schwartz and make him hire. And I don't think Schwartz would deal with that. I think guys who have been coaches would not say, dude, you're on a boat with no socks on in the Bahamas. I have to work with the coach in here. You're not telling me it'd be like somebody telling me who my reporter's going to be. Like, no dice. You're not giving me Jerry Coleman today and trading him in for Luke Jones, even if you like Jerry Coleman or Jeff Schrebeck or Jamison Hensley or anybody. Luke Jones is my guy. I pick my reporters. So that's how I feel about it. I wouldn't want to be on the phone with Jerry Coleman three times a day, let alone work all day with him. So it's it. And Steve would say, I'm hiring a guy for $8 million a year. I'm not going to tell him what to do. Okay. Well, then when you're pissed off and you've had your second Miller Lite after the game and you come down and the quarterback coach, Todd Monken, or the offensive coordinator, Greg Roman, or Cam Cameron or Jim Caldwell, all the things you think you know about football because you're the owner, that in the past you've opined about, including today, he'll opine about football today. He knows more about football than David Rubenstein knows about baseball. And
easily.
Correct. And enough to have a strong opinion, a $6 billion opinion. F you, I've been doing this 27 years opinion now. I did my apprenticeship. I know what I'm doing. We've won championships around here. I know what I'm doing. That's what Steve's going to present today. But to my point, they fall in love with Cliff Kingsbury and decide he can't be the coach, but he's a brilliant offensive mind. Do they make a recommendation to the new young coach, or do they just say this is what we want? Or is this Eric's chance to say, I'm picking the coach. I'm in the building down the hall from the coaches too. I was on the sideline with my jackass coach the last 6 years and hearing all the chaos and wondering why we're burning clock with the last 2 minutes left. Eric's been more involved too. Eric's been on the field. So I don't know, man. I literally, I've heard rumors that Bisciotti is sick. I've heard rumors of this and rumors of that. Today's the day to put all rumors away, but is it? Are they really going to get questions? Are we really going to come away with some clarity in regard to the coaching situation? Because the first part is you're saying to me that, well, it's first round, the second round. Well, what are those rounds? As I'm trying to understand how many people they're going to really be farting around with here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying. And look, and even if those questions are asked, it doesn't mean you're going to get full-blown transparency,
Well,
or even if there's a complete.
and therein lies the problem of you getting in the car and going over there for 3 hours today,
Well,
and me throwing my arms up
but that's
because,
but
like,
that's always the case, though. I mean,
I
you
just
you
wish they were
you can
honest. If you really want the truth, I wish they had the integrity they say they have. And that's all. That's
fair
it.
enough.
From
No,
from a ticket holder, from I feel that way when I buy Hershey's chocolate, right? That I expect it to be what they say it's going to be. That's all. And this organization has blown a lot of purple smoke and bullshit. Oh, especially since Bisciotti's bought the team, and especially since Harbaugh's been here, and especially since they had the parade. The last 10 or 12 years, you were there before the parade and after the parade. You know it's a completely different joint. And whether Steve knows that or not, anybody that walks in the building knows that. And I think the fans know that too. Not the sycophants, not that Harbaugh haters, but the people that have watched the totality of this, including what the Steelers have gone through, which is losing playoff games every year. And Marvin Lewis's name is at the top. And losing playoff games gets you fired. Maybe it won't Mike Tomlin, but it gets everybody else fired.
yeah, sure. To go back to your original question, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see uh, what does happen as far as do there end up being does there end up being an individual or two that they talk to about the head coach job, but the thought is more likely they're an OC candidate, or they're a DC candidate, or they're a quarterbacks coach candidate, right? And look, to your point, it does matter in terms of if you have a first time head coach who might have, and part of the interview process is also any of these candidates who would be on your staff.
Yo, that's the
Right?
first
That's
question.
that's a huge part of it.
That is the problem,
but,
right?
but
Like DaCosta looks at Kingsbury and says, who will be his DC? Who will be his quarterback? He will be the OC, I guess, right? If you're looking at certain people like that, you're feeling that way about them. And I go back, and we never mentioned this. Billick was the OC at the end when he got fired. Billick
right,
took the offense over from Fossil
midway
and
through
and
'06,
still
yeah,
got fired. Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
sure. So when you kind of look at it through that lens, I mean, it will vary a little bit, because if you do have a younger coach, I mean, surely they're going to have some ideas, and they're going to have some names that they've talked to at some point, whether it's some offensive coordinator who has talked to the running backs coach that they're currently working, at their current stop, and they have a good buddy that is a wide receivers coach for the Tennessee Titans. You know what I mean? Like,
Every coach who
it's
has
all
ever
networking.
dreamed of being a coach,
You
and
have
I
some
know a
ideas
lot
in
of them.
place.
You don't have an idea. It's a bucket list. It's one of the most important lists in your life. Is if I ever get a job, who am I going to hire?
No doubt,
And who are my friends, and who are my allies? Who do I trust? Who's a dream guy, and who's already employed by somebody else? And how can I get them? How can I get them a raise or get them a whatever? And by the way, the Harbaugh reporting of $10 million for a staff and stuff, just really bad reporting that gets shared around. Yeah, in a general sense, I think.
yeah, I mean, well, some people would also say, yeah, $10 million. I mean, you look at some of these coaching staffs that barely scratch the surface. I mean, some of these higher profile OCs and defensive coordinators make pretty good money. I mean, they do. So anyway,
I
but to
bet
go,
Schwartz was making $4 or $5 million being a defensive coordinator.
I
Of the
mean, I don't know
Browns,
the
right?
exact number, but that at all wouldn't remotely
It's
surprise me.
not
But
two.
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
it's 4 or 5 or 6 is where we are now with coordinators, right?
But
Probably 8 for a really good coordinator, right? Like Steve Spagnuolo is probably making 8.
sure. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's 8, but it's good money. There's no doubt, right? It's not what Zach Orr is making as a entry, not entry level, but first year defensive coordinator. But you just mentioned Jim Schwartz, and this is where it does vary a little bit when you're talking about Clint Kubiak compared to Jim Schwartz. The latter is 2 decades older, has collected people and networked for a much longer period of time. So yeah, when you're talking about someone who's done it a little bit longer, they're going to have, I would assume, more conviction about what their staff would look like. Whereas a younger coach, the organization probably can have a little more input on, hey, I know you've thought about this guy, and this guy. Have you considered this guy? We just talked to him. We think it'd be a good fit. We talked to him. We think your personalities. How well do you know him? Did you ever interact with that person at some Senior Bowl or something like that? Where so there's so much information gathering that goes on there. But I do think that's a very a relevant question in terms of how much autonomy would the new head coach have? Would the organization have some ideas, especially if it's a newer head coach? And let's face it, in the Ravens model of doing things, understanding it's always been owner and then GM and head coach side by side, right? It's not like the Orioles model where Craig Albertaz answers to Mike Elias as the general manager and president of baseball operations, and Elias answers to ownership, right? I mean, it's not this is not that model. It's always been that the head coach and the general manager both answer to the owner. Question, one of my questions is right there. Will that structure stay the same, or Steve being at this point in his life, especially knowing that there have been plenty of questions about how engaged, how much, how hands-on he is compared to 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
By
Would
the
it
way,
be
he's never around, according to everybody. But
sure?
go ahead.
So,
Yes.
but my question would be then, would you consider, because Eric's now been in that role a number of years as the general manager, will the head coach answer to the general manager? Is that something you'd consider, or will it stay the same in that way, where the head coach is still answering directly to the owner? So, I mean, these are relevant questions. These are things they have to sort out. These are things that maybe, like I said, a first-time head coach might be more open to more collaboration and input from others as far as putting together a staff. But I would assume Jim Schwartz, even though he hasn't been a head coach in a very long time at this point in time, he's probably going to have a little more conviction about, his staff, whereas someone who is dying to be a head coach for the first time might burr up about that a little bit more. So, I mean, it depends. I think it depends. Again, there's always, even when situations where someone has full say, that doesn't mean there's not going to be collaboration. That doesn't mean there aren't going to be questions about it. In terms of, the initial reporting as far as Steve fired John over Todd Monken, what was it really that, or was that something that they had talked about? Was that something that there were concerns about? I mean, these conversations aren't just binary, right? Like, oh, are you gonna stay? Or are you gonna go? Like, I mean, there's a lot of that gets you a lot of discussion in between that gets you to one outcome or the other. So, yeah,
I'm fascinated to know why he called John Harbaugh 2:45 when John was leaving the building, driving home after everybody there thought he had his job and fired him in the car. Like
sure,
I
sure.
was
mean,
there a relationship that deteriorated that he couldn't get on a plane and fly up and be present like he's being today, this week?
yeah,
Like
yeah. No, that's absolutely
Oh,
very
I
fair,
mean,
valid
I'm
question.
utterly disgusted with all of it because I do this in front of people and people said Bisciotti wouldn't read my letter. He'll read my letter, believe me. Everybody in the building's read my letter. Um, because it calls all of them out and it's honest. I don't know what else to say and he hasn't been around in 8 years. The first questions for him should be about Justin Tucker. One of the sleaziest things that's happened in the history of sports in the city that went on, that was pushed under the carpet, that there's all these women in the marketplace who are our sisters, they are our daughters, they're the women of this community, never been answered to by the billionaire. And whether he knew or not, he knew. So just ask him and see if he'll lie about it or not. So if you not use somebody in that room should be asking him about Justin Tucker. This shouldn't be all coach, 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 coach. Somebody also should be asking about the $600 million that that got you thrown out of the press box, me thrown out of the stadium. That they've never had a comment. They've never said thank you. He's never said thank you to the citizens of Maryland for giving him $600 million for fixing the stadium. I guess thank you's too big. It's too much for him. It's like leaving a press credential for real media people. I mean, they're twisted, dude. And you're in the building all the time, and you know that. I don't know how that's going to change with a new head coach. I hope it does, but I do think what I wrote a week ago, I'll stand by it. Culture and honesty. Can I trust you? Can you trust me? No one in the city should trust Chad Steele. No one in the city should have trusted John Harbaugh. I don't think Lamar Jackson trusted John Harbaugh in the end. And I'm not sure that Steve Bisciotti trusted John Harbaugh in the end when he fired him. I don't trust you to run the team anymore. This isn't working.
Oh,
And yeah,
I mean that last part's evident. I mean, if he if he had full confidence that John was going to be able to turn it around in 2026 and moving forward, he wouldn't have fired him. I mean, and that doesn't necessarily mean that someone's completely broken your trust beyond repair as much as sometimes it's
By the
time.
way, I think John will fail where he goes next. That's my opinion.
Well, I mean,
My opinion is all that he's learned, the wisdom that he's picked up has not served him well. His wisdom has led to arrogance and it's led to failure. And I don't think he's become a better man or a better coach through all of this. I think he became a more powerful coach who rested on his stripes and kept pointing to the trophy. That's and also the fact that he had all of this talent around him. Eric and Ozzie and the strength of the organization helped a lot
I mean,
for
I think
John.
it's I think
Helped him keep his
it
job
helps
through four
every
job
it helps
cycles.
every coach. I mean,
Yeah.
that look. I
Good
mean,
players are where it's at, period.
right. I mean that's the biggest thing. I mean, some of the other stuff you mentioned. I mean, it's hard to quantify, right? It's hard to determine. There have been. I mean, it's not like Bill Belichick was regarded as this warm and fuzzy great human being that everyone loved inside the building in Foxborough, but he got results and they had really good players for a long time until Tom Brady left and other guys got old and he didn't draft as well and you saw what happened. Then they moved on, right? So
I'm just saying from a personality standpoint, right? Like two of the people they brought in the building this week on Zoom are people I know really, really well. Jim Schwartz, I know really well. Anthony Weaver, I know very well. Not really well, but very well.
yeah,
I in my time with them, in their integrity and their character, I'll tell you straight away, they're better people than John Harbaugh, and they're way different people than John Harbaugh in regard to integrity and honesty and all of that. I mean, I've known Brian Billick 30 years. He'd never lied to me. Like Marvin Lewis, I've known him for 35 years, never lied to me. So like I don't Mike Nolan, Mike Smith, Rex would lie to anybody, but Rex didn't lie to me. So I'm just thinking about the people that they've had in that building and the kinds of personalities. John is the most paranoid human I've ever met in coaching. And I'm talking about baseball and Davey Johnson had some paranoia about him, and Johnny Oates had some military in him. Anybody that's military's got some paranoia in them. They're trained that way, looking over like cops. But not that's not a prerequisite for being the next coach is to be duplicitous and to be John's personality. I don't know what it was about John or John's personality that won Steve over. All of that humility and special team coach from 18 years ago, that got baked out after the first 100 million and the Super Bowl. And I think most people would tell you that. If you met John Harbaugh, I'm going back to looking at what John Harbaugh looked like and the way he comported himself and the way he spoke in 2008 and 9 and 10 and 11 and where he is now and what the Giants are going to get or what the Falcons or what Johnny Bravo they're going to get in a different place. There is that part of the personality that Steve really liked. And I went through that in my Culture Dear Steve letter, which is in the end, Steve likes bullies. He does. So, I mean, Chad Steele, I mean, come on. There's never been a more classic bully that I've ever met than Chad Steele. Than most people around me say they use the same word with him, bully. So that's what Steve likes. And I don't know whether this will be a Steve hire or an Eric hire or a think tank organization hire. Organization hire means that's what Steve calls it when Steve makes a decision and says it's everybody else's decision. And I'm concerned about all of that for a guy who was in the building a lot when he hired John. When he was around John, part of it was he was around Brian every day and didn't like Brian and wanted something different. And he brought John in and he was around there a lot. And he had his consigliere down the hallway and he believed in John and John was like a child to him. That relationship became a weird uncle, at some point. And now Steve's going out and doing this again. And I've only seen Steve pick one person. Well, two, if you take Eric. And Eric, he didn't pick Eric. He loved Eric and brought him in. But Steve hasn't been a guy who's brought a lot of people outside the building. And by the way, Sashi Brown wasn't Steve's guy. It was Dick's guy. Dick brought Sashi Brown in. I don't know how often Steve even deals with him or even cares. Steve's made $4 billion since the last time he got in front of you. What does he care about what Sashi Brown's doing or Chad Steele's doing or even the coach is doing other than winning?
I was just going to say, he cares about winning because they didn't win in 2025 for the first, in terms of the regular season, first time in, since Lamar was hurt in 2021 and they made a change. So he cares. Now, does that mean he's going to hire the right guy or they're going to hire the right guy? We're going to find out, right? He obviously built an empire on hiring people, in his former life and, former, business endeavors. So he clearly has an aptitude, or at least had an aptitude for doing that, had an aptitude for doing it 18 years ago, regardless of how anyone might feel about John Harbaugh now. That was a wildly successful hire. Whether, regardless of when you think it started going south. 18 years is 18 years. The first 10 years are the first 10 years, right? Especially in this day and age where some of these teams in this hiring cycle are hiring a coach 2 years after they last did it, right? And that's just how it works for some of these.
Some of these guys seem to like interviewing people. Arthur Blank, he said, how many coaches?
I was going to say, right? Interviewed? Think about some of the number of hiring cycles that some of these teams and owners have
brought Schwartz down there 15 years ago and took him up in the building down in Buckhead. It's he's talked to half the guys in the league because he has every 3 years he's interviewing 15 more guys.
Yeah. And just because they have that experience doesn't mean that they are any better at actually picking someone.
Well, and to your point, whoever finished second last time doesn't mean anything. Jason Garrett's not even getting a whiff this time. Yeah, and he was the apple of Steve's eye 18 years ago.
And that's what's kind of interesting when you look at, and this is where we transition just to briefly look at kind of the rundown of who they are talking to or have plans to talk to. It's, with Jim Schwartz's, reporting on Jim Schwartz on Monday, that's now 8. I believe it's 8 former head coaches that they have plans to talk to. Most of them fall into the realm of very recently was a head coach. Obviously, Kevin Stefanski, Mike McDaniel. But you do look at Vance Joseph, for example, who was one of the very first interviews they completed. Denver was on the bye, and that's part of the reason why. But he's 53, and he was a head coach in 2017 and 18. That's a while ago at this point. You're talking 8 or 9 years ago. We talked about Schwartz. Schwartz, it's hard to believe. I didn't think it had been this long. Detroit was 2009 through 13. You're talking about that's Harbaugh's peak, Super Bowl time for the Ravens.
Schwartz has been in Buffalo, Tennessee.
He's been a lot of places, yeah.
Philadelphia and Cleveland since then that I know, and he's made every one of their defenses better.
And he's 59. I think full-blown truth serum, I'm guessing Schwartz is more of a let's size him up to see whoever we're actually going to hire to be our head coach. Maybe we make him the high, and he might already be for all I know, but make him the highest paid defensive coordinator in the league. And
by the way, Chip Kelly was reported at $6 million as a coordinator. Yeah, so I looked that up. But I would think Spagnuolo is the highest paid coordinator in the league right now. I would think he is.
But it goes to the point that your original point was that reporting that John Harbaugh wants $10 million for his coaching staff budget. It's like that's nothing when you kind of think about how many coaches you need to hire. And of course, no, your running backs coach isn't going to be making $3 million, but your
Spagnuolo's making $5 a year according to the internet. Yes.
There you go. But that's where you're kind of looking at this thing. So anyway, but you look at most of the former head coaches and, Vance Joseph, I mentioned, Jim Schwartz, Stefanski, just fired, right? Brian Flores has been talked about, even though they haven't completed an interview. He was in Miami 2019 through 21. That one, is that a real, is that a full-blown head coaching? You're really serious about potentially hiring him? Or is that another one that, looking at it through the lens of Schwartz, where you'd say maybe make Brian Flores the highest paid defensive coordinator in the NFL? I don't know. But, Robert Saleh obviously was very recently with the Jets. Kingsbury, Arizona, he's a few years removed from that. But the point is, these aren't Jason Garrett, right? Schwartz is kind of the exception there. Vance Joseph, the exception there. These are all former head coaches, but had been head coaches very recently. So, you kind of look at that. We talked about Matt Nagy in passing in one of our previous segments. My gut tells me Matt Nagy's probably not a serious head coach candidate for them, but he's worked with Andy Reid. He's worked with Patrick Mahomes. Be interesting to hear what his vision would be for Lamar Jackson, even if it's kind of just in a general sense. And maybe they'd hire him to be their offensive coordinator if they hire a more defensive minded head coach. So, it's all about the puzzle, right? I mean, it's kind of a puzzle you're putting together. Uh, Based on everything we've seen, I think it's apparent that they're not going the CEO route again. It appears that whoever the head coach is going to be, it's going to be someone who has a greater level of expertise on one side of the ball or the other. Although I would say, like Anthony Weaver, for example, it's not as though he has this lengthy history of having amazing defenses. I'm guessing Weaver would be a little more skewing towards a little more of a CEO type, but he's been a defensive coordinator, of course. I'm not saying he doesn't know defense, but it feels like much more of these candidates that they're talking to this time around are much more an offensive genius or a defensive genius, right? Rather than, I mean, to my knowledge, they haven't talked to anyone who's just a special teams coach. So, I don't think you're going to see that again. But you're trying to figure out the puzzle. It's like, okay, you go offensive minded head coach who may or may not be the play caller, but is clearly going to be very hands on. So what does that mean for their offensive coordinator then? Because like Matt Nagy, okay, he's the OC with the Chiefs. He doesn't call plays. I mean, it's Andy Reid, so it's a different job. So do you have that? And then you need to make sure you have an excellent established defensive coordinator, most likely. Or on the flip
Who's the
side,
quarterback coach? That's the thing I can't like. To me, if you
and that's
want
part of it
Lamar
too.
better, who's in the room with Lamar all day? T. Martin was the guy, right? Last
Sure. So, and that's obviously a big part of it too. I mean, would you have let's say Kevin Stefanski becomes the head coach of the Baltimore Ravens? He's going to be the play call. Actually, I shouldn't make that assumption because he didn't call plays the entire time in Cleveland necessarily. He had passed that off and then taken back play calling duties at a couple points. But let's say whoever it is, it's a head coach, offensive minded, it's going to call plays in the same way that Sean McVay does, in the same way that Andy Reid does, in the same way that Kyle Shanahan does. Well, then who is the OC? Is that OC just that title, or is that an offensive coordinator slash quarterbacks coach? And that's going to be the guy that works very closely with Lamar Jackson.
Well, that's where Kingsbury would come in if he's not getting a head coaching job anywhere else.
I
Is
mean,
that's the kind of guy he was a quarterback, and he was a quarterback, right?
sure.
So and a lot of the really good offensive head coaches, Andy Reid, John Gruden, they were quarterback coaches. That's what the first job was being a quarterback coach, was seeing the game like that or being a quarterback like that. Jim Harbaugh, same thing. He's a quarterback coach. That's what
Yeah.
he did when he came back to the NFL.
Yeah, but on the flip side of that, if that's the way you're going to go, you need to make sure you have a great defensive coordinator then, right? Because I mean, like Andy Reid, he doesn't know anything about defense, but he's got Spags, he's got Steve Spagnuolo running the show, and when they've been at their best in recent years, their defense has been excellent. I mean, go back to 2 years ago. I mean, when they came into Baltimore and beat the Ravens, I mean, it's not as though their offense was great that day, but their defense did a hell of a job. So you're when you're talking to all these different candidates, and you see a lot of fans do this on Twitter, and I don't say this to be disparaging. It's interesting. It's how's the puzzle going to fit? Who's head coach? What's that mean for the offensive coordinator? What's that mean for the defensive coordinator? How's that going to fit? Where are the relationships? Who's worked with whom elsewhere in the past that might be a connection, right? You're looking for that connective tissue, right? And I just mentioned Stefanski. I would assume if Stefanski, if he would get the Ravens job, and I'm not saying he will, but if he were to get that, you would think the fact that Jim Schwartz worked with him in Cleveland might bode well for the Ravens' prospects of making Jim Schwartz their defensive coordinator in Baltimore and making him the highest paid defensive coordinator if that's what it takes to get him to Baltimore. So, you don't know how it's going to work. And but to go back to your original question, I mean, you go back to John Harbaugh when he was hired in 2008, Rex Ryan stayed on as defensive coordinator for a year. And while that could have been very awkward and uncomfortable, and that flat out could have not worked, quite frankly, considering Rex went for that job and was interviewed for that job. Whether the Ravens were ever going to seriously consider him or not, he was at least talked to, but they made it work. And John helped Rex in some ways, and then Rex got a head coaching gig the year after that. So, I'm not saying that history is going to repeat itself in that way, but yeah, when you have a first-time head coach or a younger head coach, those are the cases where the organization's going to have more influence in terms of hiring a staff. And sometimes that's out of necessity. John Harbaugh has 18 years at of head coaching experience, let alone his prior experiences to collect people, to put together his own staff, and to make the demand in Atlanta or Cleveland or the Giants or the Dolphins or wherever he ends up in saying, yeah, part of the deal of me coming here is I want you can give me some input, but I'm going to have the final say on my entire coaching staff. I mean that would be, I would think, would be quite standard in terms of longtime head coaches, right? I don't think Pittsburgh's telling Mike Tomlin who he needs to hire as their new offensive coordinator. If Mike Tomlin's going to be in Pittsburgh, I mean, you and I, as we're speaking in real time, who knows what's going to happen there? So, there's so much to answer. Are we going to get full blown clarity on all of these issues and all of these questions and all these topics? I doubt it, but I am glad we are going to at least get an opportunity, because it's something that, what used to be an annual expectation, and that was a good thing, and that's gone away. So, we're going to find out, and we'll see. I mean,
There's one of the first questions. Where the hell have you been? How about that? Why'd you stop doing this after 8 years? You hurt
yeah,
John's feelings, holding him accountable? I know I did. I know what happens when you hold people accountable in that building. You get uninvited for asking questions, because that's who they are. That really is who they are. Today's a great example of that. And you'll see that today. Anybody that's watching, you'll see Chad Steele pointing to bunkies. You'll hear questions from Ravens.com employees who basically work for Steve. It's like that woman kissing Liam Cohen's ass in the press conference. Do that off the podium. You got you got the offseason to do that.
yeah.
These people are managed by people like Chad Steele. They're thrown onto the stage. They're told what they can and can't say, even when they're the owner. And they're pointed, the hand-picked people that Chad feels will have a safe question, not a good question, a safe question, a company question, they get pointed to, and then Steve will be whisked off the stage. And if you go to YouTube, you can see droves of Steve little snippets where he would do, after the podium, he would just talk to people about things, about Ray Lewis, about the league, about Roger Goodell, about his philosophy, about what he thinks of the city, what he thinks should be done to the inner harbor. Just things.
Sure.
Because he never speaks. And the more money this guy has gotten, the more arrogant he's gotten and the more checked out he's been, which is really reminiscent of his coach. The more money his coach got, the more power his coach got, the more prickly his coach got, the more secretive his coach got, the more his coach lied and then looked at you and pointed at you and said, if you don't lie, I'll throw you out, which is what happened to me. So that's the truth. And it's sad. I mean, I love the Ravens. I love football. I hate being eliminated. I like rooting against the Steelers and watching them stink and watching all the turmoil around the league. But I just wish we had better people in front of the organization. And as I watch it on television on Tuesday afternoon, all of this transpire, I'm going to be interested to see what they're being honest about and what they're willing to be honest about. First question, what did you know about Justin Tucker? It'll start with lies, and then it'll devolve from there if that's the first. Be lucky to get a Justin Tucker question in, and nobody will think to ask about the $600 million that he's taken since the last time. So this is another game. When you go 8 years, that's 8 years worth of. Has he ever answered a question about Lamar in any way?
I mean, not in Owings Mills, because the last time that he did a press conference in their building,
Lamar was in Louisville.
Lamar was a couple months away from being drafted. I mean, the owners' meetings in 22, yeah, he was asked about Lamar at that point in time, because that was coinciding with Lamar at that point negotiating or not negotiating. And
I witnessed that when my organization, my news organization that's broke news here for 30 years from Baltimore, watched the New York Times, ESPN, and a paywall local site that was fledgling at the time sit with the owner of the team while I witnessed it from 60 feet away and not being able to ask questions on behalf of the fans. It's just not what anybody signed up for. But Uncle Steve's coming to town. He's returning home to Owings Mills. Luke will be out there today. He'll have questions for the owner. You expect any more names, or you think they're done? I mean, if Mike Tomlin gets fired, would they interview him? I guess they would. I don't know. Would they? You're laughing, dude. Don't laugh.
No. Can you imagine the scenario where, I mean, it's not going to happen. But
Well, 2 days ago, people thought Harbaugh might be
I
coaching
mean,
the Packers. That's not happening
I've
yet.
seen some people joke that Tomlin. What? How funny would it be if Tomlin wound up in Baltimore and John Harbaugh wound up in Pittsburgh? Take it a step further. How about Kevin Stefanski winds up in Baltimore? Mike Tomlin winds up with the Browns, and John Harbaugh is the coach of the Steel. I mean, like, let's get nuts if we're going to get nuts. I mean, I'm not. I don't think that's going to happen. Tomlin's just like Harbaugh at this point. Like, until they actually do it, I'm guessing he's not going anywhere. But I said the same thing about John, and then 2 days later.
Well, this is the interesting thing, and I like just take 2 more minutes on this.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people think John got fired on purpose because he wanted to get away from. I would be one of these people. I don't think John liked Lamar. You know why I know that? Because I have text in my phone that tell me John didn't like Lamar years ago. So, and didn't like Lamar's work ethic and didn't like Lamar not showing up at OTAs. And John will never admit to that because Lamar's going to the Hall of Fame and he thinks he is too. So they might be going in the same year for all we know, right? And they didn't win anything together. That's a fact. They didn't win anything together. Unless John goes and takes the Dolphins job and Lamar shows up there 2 years from now, and that ain't happening because Lamar would never sign up to play for John again from what I know. I wouldn't want to do that. He was the one putting the Instagram little tune ditties out to diss Harbaugh last week after Harbaugh got fired. So
allegedly, that's your opinion. I don't know if it was that deep or not. But anyway, go ahead.
Well,
no, Lamar posts a lot of stuff on Instagram that doesn't necessarily have meaning. I mean, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't know. Anyway.
Sorry, there's a whole industry in interpreting Lamar's tweets, right?
Yeah, and most of it's nonsensical. And I would say for everything that someone interprets, I think that for everything that might actually have some meaning, I think there's many more that he's.
Well, Lamar didn't have any vote in this, right? Lamar was drafted by these people who told them that they loved him. They brought him in. They gave him the ball right away, let him run around and have success. They paid him. He played well. He stepped up and did everything they asked him to do. Then he gets hurt. And again, for the third time in 5 years, and the coach gets fired, and he's survived it. And he's about to get a raise. He's about to get another big bag of money. So, and he's going to call the shots. And the new head coach has to be Lamar approved. That's way different than the way Steve did this the last time around. So knowing all of that and knowing John's personality pretty well as I do, John looked at this and said, all right, we lose, ball sails wide, I'm getting shit canned. What are the other jobs? Is this a good job cycle or is it a bad job cycle? It's like having the number 1 pick in a draft where there's no quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. Is it a good draft or is it a bad draft? If you're Mike Tomlin right now, and the Green Bay job looked like it might pop for 30 seconds this week too.
Which Pittsburgh could.
The Pittsburgh job might pop as well, right? That opens things up for Harbaugh. It opens things up for lots of people, right? If you're Mike Tomlin and you're looking to like get another job, if you're not going to be in Pittsburgh the next 5 years, if you're thinking I'm not here for the next quarterback, the next rebuild, the next 9-8 season of struggle or whatever it will be, if you're a coach and you're like, this is my chance to get to Atlanta. This is my chance to get to Miami. This is my chance to get somewhere with the owner I met and this wouldn't be Mike Tomlin because why do you think Mike Tomlin hangs out with me at the owners' meetings? Why do you think that is? Because he's a little bit of a pariah to everyone else. He hasn't made friends. He's not whose ass has he kissed looking for a job the last 19 years? Nobody. Whose ass did he not kick and not blow kisses at the camera? Mike's not popular like that. You know what I mean? Like, he's just not. And I don't mean that in a way like he's hired and fired coaches. He pissed Bruce Arians off. So everybody loves Bruce Arians. Doesn't like Mike because Mike fired him 15 years ago. Like, so Mike is one of those guys that might take a job somewhere you wouldn't think and say, I'll figure my next job out. They're going to give me $100 million. I'll figure it out. But I think Mike loves Pittsburgh. I think he loves the Rooney family. I don't think he would leave. But I do think if you are a coach, you're looking at this like a bonanza. Like if you're Jim Schwartz, he's gotten 2 interviews this week. To your point, he hasn't been a coach in 13 years. He's coming off this great defense. He's got a ring now with Philadelphia. I mean,
I mean,
He's
Schwartz, this might be his last chance.
he's 59, right?
If he's to be a head coach again, which I'm still very skeptical that he's going to get a head coach gig, but this is his last. This feels like this would be his last chance. I mean, that Cleveland Myles Garrett record-breaking season with the sacks record, all that. So yeah, there's all of this is calculated. I mean, it has to be. You know,
I'm just saying it's a good time to be in the market with all these jobs for the next week or two, as opposed to if Mike Tomlin hits the market next year. All these jobs will fill for the most part. Maybe one of them, maybe some chump like Atlanta will fire their coach again after a year or what. I don't know. The Vegas job, who the hell knows? But there is a point in all of this where if you're Mike Tomlin this morning, not necessarily LaFleur. I don't know if LaFleur would get a job right away. Maybe even get one of these 8 or 9, maybe. But there is a point where Kevin Stefanski's scarred if you bring him into Baltimore next week to some degree, even though there's nothing wrong with Kevin Stefanski. There's something wrong with every Jim Schwartz and Kevin Stefanski and Vance Joseph who had a 4-12 record the last time they coached somewhere. And that's part of, I don't know that Miami and Atlanta need to sell tickets or they feel like they need to reinvigorate their fan base. Steve certainly feels that way. Steve's had a full stadium become empty in this era. He should look at Sashi Brown and Chad Steele about that as much as anything else. That's why my 2 seats are empty, because of Chad Steele, not because I don't like the team or I'm mad at John or mad at losing or whatever. But in other places, Arizona, I guess they could bring Mike Tomlin in or John Harbaugh and say we fix things the way they did Buddy Ryan 40 years ago. But there is a point where getting a job right this minute would be better for Mike Tomlin than it would be a year from now if Mike Tomlin's concerned about Mike Tomlin. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. And I mean, there's been a lot of smoke out there that he's got a TV offer in his back pocket and he does that for a year and then either maybe becomes Bill Cowher and realizes, hey, I like this way more than coaching and this is a way better gig and it's a way better quality of life. Or does he go the Sean Payton route and land somewhere and Pittsburgh gets a draft pick for him because there'd be 1 year left on his deal and he goes somewhere in 2027, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be.
Would the Ravens even want him? No.
I don't even say this just because like it's the same kind of coach. Your issues for why you're firing John. Now, personalities, put that aside. But in terms of like results on the field, your issues for firing John it's the same exact thing. I mean, it's been even longer since he last won a Super Bowl.
Tomlin would look across and say, John had a hell of a lot more talent the last 5 years than I had.
That's fair, but it's still the same perception. And let's face it, even towards the end of the Roethlisberger era, their postseason success had really started to dry up as well. I mean, they've gone a decade now without a playoff win. So, you know, I think it's funny. You just mentioned LaFleur, and like, if I were a team, like if I were an owner or general manager, I'd be way more interested in LaFleur than Harbaugh or Tomlin in terms of the actual football piece of this. And that's not to say LaFleur, I'm not saying he's the next Andy Reid necessarily either, but Harbaugh and Tomlin are way more the optics hires, obviously, because, I mean, they've done it as long as they have. And they have Hall of Fame credentials or near Hall of Fame credentials. I'm not saying that to be disparaging, but I also do think in a lot of ways it's a younger man's game in terms of being a head coach. And I think that's some of this is also some of the consideration. You mentioned it with Lamar, but it's true of your entire 53-man roster. All things being equal, I'd probably want a younger head coach to connect with this generation of players, not to be their buddy per se, but you might be able to communicate more effectively with them. You might be able to connect with what's going to make them tick more effectively. And I'm not saying John couldn't do that or that Tomlin can't do that, and that's why they haven't won as much in recent years. There's always so many variables to this, but that would be a consideration for me where I would look at that, and my bias would be probably to trend younger at least. And that doesn't mean 30 either, but would be someone that I'd be much more inclined to hire someone in their late 30s or their early to mid 40s than someone who's 63, right? I mean, and that's, I think, look around the league and look where head coaches are as far as that demographic goes. And I think The league's very clearly gone in that direction here in recent years, with a few exceptions. Harbaugh, Tomlin, Andy Reid, right? Pete Carroll got back in and then is thrown out again after a year because it was an absolute disaster. Not that he had much of a chance with the Raiders, but yeah, I mean it's a younger man's game. So, I think LaFleur would be, I think he'd be a hot commodity. Maybe not to the degree of Harbaugh or Tomlin, but he certainly there'd be three or four other teams that would be eager to hire him if the Packers don't work out the extension as you the way that that's been reported, that feels ominous that could be heading towards a
Well,
divorce.
that would be the Mike Tomlin thing. If next year's a lame duck year, then what are we doing, right?
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
So we'll find out.
We got football Saturday, Bills at Broncos, 4:30, 8 o'clock game, 49ers at Seattle. Sunday, the Houston Texans, who eliminated the Pittsburgh Steelers on Monday night, will play the 3 o'clock game in New England, and then the Rams and the Bears will close it out at 6:30 on Sunday night. So we'll have some football here this week. Luke is in Owings Mills. Any breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service, brought to you by Cole Roofing and Gordian Energy. I'm wearing my Fadley shirt right now. We're going to be doing a Cup of Super Bowl brought to you by the Maryland Lottery, as well as our friends at GBMC. We're doing that the first week of February. We're going to be all over the community doing some good stuff. And I am going to be writing on the backside of the Steve Bisciotti press conference, as will Luke. We will have a new head coach here. I'm waiting for the purple plumes of smoke to arrive over Owings Mills. I am Nestor. He is Luke. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. Nobody's talking Ravens better than us. We're Baltimore positive. Stay with us.